There's definitely times that, so there's been times I've felt like it was a point where I needed to speak up and maybe take things to the next level, just, where we all might be thinking something, but it's not being said. So that's happened a couple times, but, there's other times where we've kind of talked amongst ourselves and it didn't really, it wasn't like we should really evaluate this. And so one instance was in 2011 in Wyoming, a different fire. It was kind of south central Wyoming, and really there's just a couple ranges out in the middle of these big open fields and this small little mountain. It wasn't even a range, it was just one mountain with a couple little peaks around it, and it had fire on it. And each night when the sun went down, it would make these big downhill pushes into the flats, and that was what was giving them headaches day in after day. And it was something we said when we first got there. It's like, well, just let this mountain burn and catch it on the flats. So we all saw it right away, and of course in the end that's exactly what happened. But the last night when we tried to catch it kind of halfway up this mountain, it was something we hadn't seen leading up to this point. We didn't have much time to prep. We just kind of drove up into the saddle halfway up, and then we got caught up with trying to prep it real quick, with trying to make a plan. Originally we were just going to go look at it, and kind of some of that creep fell into place where we just got kind of committed, prepping and getting into place, and then all of a sudden we're ready to start burning. And I still kick myself for this, and I know I'm not the only one, but I kind of just, I had one of those feelings, and it was one of those nights, it was still day, so one of those days we were talking amongst ourselves, like something just kind of feels off, but no one could quite put their finger on it. Well, of course, right when we're getting ready to burn, the time had gone by pretty quick, was right when the sun was setting, and in this bowl there was already, we started in a saddle. The plan was to kind of burn this mid-slope that came down to the flats. Well, in this whole bowl adjacent to us, there was kind of fire already scattered along in it. And right when we're getting ready to put torches to the ground is right when the sun set, and we decided to give it just a minute before we started lighting, just kind of take a collective breath before we got committed. And sure enough, in a matter of seconds after that transmission came over the radio, the wind picked up and pushed this thing down slope. That whole bowl lit up so fast where it was scary. That was one of those moments that I was fairly nervous. And most of our group, all but just a couple, were pretty close to this saddle where it wasn't that big of a deal to get up and over the other side and get away from what was going on. But the way that whole bowl lit up, getting those guys together, and then it was one of those just as quickly as you can, count, make sure we've got everyone. But of course we had one of our guys kind of working with some engines that were halfway down, and he kind of needed to find his own way out. Of course he had his escape route already in place, but worrying about him not being able to communicate because we're trying to get out the other way. Our lookout, who was down farther in the flats, he was already getting ember wash all around him. He was in a good spot, but wanting to get the vehicles out of there, and of course he's worried about us and the other guy that's working his way down. And it was one of those ones where had we gotten committed with firing halfway down, we could, potentially would have been a lot hairier of an experience trying to get everyone off that hill. I like to think that we would have, but it would have been a lot more chaotic. And then, outside of fire, there's been fires where I feel like we got lucky. Just, we were in some bad snag areas with fire, and we did have some near misses, some close calls that we try to mitigate as best as we can. But looking back, it's tough to really challenge yourself to say this, but should we have been in there in the first place? Did we kind of get away with one of those 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 sort of situations? And maybe. So those are always kind of tough to think about, but yeah, I feel like, again, there's always that 1 in a million, and any day we're even driving somewhere is hazardous, and and hearing about other crews every season, not just hotshot crews, but engine crews and IA crews or Type 2 crews, helicopters, right? So yeah, I definitely we try to do the best we can every day, and knowing that the job's risky, but trying to mitigate it as best as possible. That's actually, we try to have some sort of discussion during our critical where we look back at maybe something that happened last season with somebody else, where we just try to open up a discussion where we try to put our finger on something, and that's exactly what we're aiming to do this season, is kind of putting our finger on that bad feeling and how should we take that to the next level, or when is it appropriate to swallow that, or is it ever appropriate to swallow that? And so it's so hard to put your finger on that bad feeling. So anymore, it's just, let's talk about it, let's get it out in the open, let's address it, because maybe you're not the only one with that bad feeling, and then that person that you're talking to says, yeah, I'm feeling the same thing, and now let's reassess what we're doing. So it's so hard to put your finger on that sixth sense. It really is nothing more than a feeling, and experience definitely builds into that, and those slides and what you've seen happen in the past. But always trying to keep in the back of your mind that worst case scenario. And when you start seeing, maybe early on in the day you've got this worst case scenario painted in your own mind, and when you start seeing things kind of fall into those lines and those dominoes falling in that direction, that's definitely when I start getting that bad feeling, where maybe it wasn't even spoken about as a group, but here's my worst case scenario for the day, and boy, it's sure going that way right now. Maybe it's time to talk about it, and let's get this out there. So, yeah, I guess that's my take on that.